This video is sponsored by Ulanzi. So I had a thought. I think every micro four nerd out there really covets the Olympus Pen F, but there's no denying that it's quite expensive. And it's 10 years old. So what if you could get a similar experience for a third of the price? I haven't really explored the Olympus EPL series of cameras very much, and I've recently invested in a PL9. This is very budget friendly. I bought it from MPB for £265. It's designed to be a pen light. That's literally the name of that range of cameras. So I thought I'd take it out for a spin and see how close we can get, see what's lacking, and see if it's worth it. The Olympus PL9 is a snazzy, stylish little number. I actually got as many compliments on this camera when I was in Cape Town as I did the Pen F. I spent 1 week with the Pen F and then 1 week with the PL9. And I think there's a really nice attention to detail to it. I like that, for example, the lens release is brown, like the camera. And I like that the lettering is gold and it looks really stylish against the brown. There are other colours available. The blue one is my personal favourite, but that tends to be a little bit more rare and a little bit more expensive. And I am a cheapskate at heart, so I went for the brown as my second option. The PL9 has a 16 megapixel micro four thirds sensor. So compared to the Pen F has the 20 megapixel sensor, but it's not too dissimilar. It has 5-axis stabilization, which is just living up to the Olympus standards in that respect. The stabilization has been great. I managed to get many handheld exposures at night, for example, with the PL9. It's a lot lighter and smaller than the Pen F, coming in at just 330 grams, and you still have a nice grip, whereas the Pen F is lacking in the grip department. A lot of Pen F enthusiasts tend to attach an additional grip to it, whereas the PL9 feels very nice in the hand. Unlike the Pen F, you can use this whole camera one-handed because the on and off switch is on the right, and you do have one dial on the top to use as your settings, and then everything else is sort of within the menus. So you do admittedly get a much less tactile experience with the PL9 versus the Pen F. The Pen F has dials and buttons for days, and I think that's what really draws people to that camera, whereas the PL9 you've got your one on top and then everything else is in menus. The screen articulation on the PL9 is a sight to behold. It's one of the few cameras I've ever used that flips entirely under the camera, which is bonkers, but maybe good for selfies, I don't know. And also, like, the articulation in general just is crazy and wacky, and I like it. There is no EVF, which is a huge downside to this versus the Pen F, but for that you do have an articulating screen to rely on, and it is much smaller and much lighter and much, much cheaper. I mean, I did say it was the Pen Light. We're not going to get all of the features. I'm sorry. I wish we could. So how does it feel in the real world? I think it's a very stylish little number. It's quite a timeless looking camera. And if sort of the style of your everyday carry camera is important to you, I think this ticks a lot of boxes. I think the PL9 looks a lot more expensive than it is, but doesn't necessarily feel expensive. The Pen F feels very premium and looks premium, whereas the PL9 sells it pretty decently from afar. There are some lovely practical things that I enjoy about the Olympus PL9, one of which is the built-in flash. I've really warmed to this feature in recent years, actually. I used to be like, I don't really care. But when you're taking pictures at night, maybe informal photos of your friends and family, it's always handy to just have a flash if the camera allows. And I learned very quickly that it's easier to pull the flash back to make it a little bit more dampened so that you're not beaming people in the face with it. One piece of camera equipment that is so valuable is your tripod. They may not be the sexiest things in the world, but sometimes they're very cool indeed. I have the Ulanzi JJ06 tripod, and it has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. Check this out. I use this for overhead shots, I use this for video B-roll shots, and I'm talking to it right the heck now. It's just reliable, wonderful, the quick release is wonderful, it's very light, and I think sometimes people just put off investing in decent tripods because they'd rather spend money on a new shiny lens or whatever, and I've been guilty of that in the past as well. But it really does quantifiably improve the quality of life for your photography and videography day to day for months and months and years to come. So buy it once, look after it, it'll last you for ages, and it's well worth the upgrade. So check out the tripod in the description, and let's get back to the nerdiness. There are a ton of great computational features built into the PL9. It's quite feature rich in that department for the price point. One of which, and I haven't used it in blooming years, is panorama. How cool is this panorama? I was driving back down this road with an Uber driver, and he very kindly pulled into a passing place to let us out and take photographs. It was such a beautiful view, but I really didn't have much time. I didn't want to impose. So I just whacked it in panorama mode and then did it in camera, and it turned out great. I only had a 17mm lens with me. It is what it is. Sometimes you just gotta lean on the camera if it does that. There is also live composite mode, which is my personal favorite computational feature of all time, and live time as well, which is a really interesting one if you haven't heard of live time. It's basically like, you know, when your camera's in bulb mode and you just like have like a 5-second exposure, for example, and the screen goes black. You can only see the results at the end. So oftentimes for me, there's like a trial and error where I go, okay, 5 seconds was overexposed, let's try 3 seconds or whatever. With live time, you can hold the shutter down and the screen doesn't go blank. It develops in front of you as the image is exposing. So you can take out the trial and error and you know exactly when to stop along exposure. So how does it compare to the Pen F? And I have a really sort of great real world example because I literally spent 1 week with one and 1 week with the other. I have to say in Cape Town, with the very bright conditions, EVF was sorely missed on the not having one on the PL9. In the UK, when it's generally just miserable all the time, I can really take or leave an EVF. I don't mind at all, but in brighter days, it really does make a difference. There was some shots on the PL9 where I could not compose at all with the screen, and I was just eyeballing it because I roughly know what 17mm looks like because I use it quite a lot. And thankfully it turned out okay, but composition was not hard in those moments. It was literally just shooting and praying. While I do love the dials on the Pen F, you know, you've got a dial for every setting if you want. The PL9 does have just one dial, as I've said, but depending on the mode that you're shooting in, depends on how much that bothers you. Like usually when I'm walking around on a bright day, I'll shoot in aperture priority, and then on like a cloudier moment, I'll switch to shutter speed priority, and that leaves my ISO as auto anyway. The one dial that I found that I really missed on the PL9 was the exposure compensation. I just like to, on very bright days, knock it down 0.3 of an EV just so I know that my sky doesn't overexpose, for example. It's always easier to pull up the shadows than recover the highlights. And then sometimes if I'm exposing for someone's face, you might need to go in the opposite direction and up the exposure compensation. And doing that on the Pen F is just really, really easy and nice to do. Of course, you can adjust your exposure compensation on the PL9, but it is in a menu rather than a physical dial. So I did miss that. If having an EVF and having 2 dials for your settings is a deal breaker for you, then another budget alternative to the Pen F would be the EM5 and EM10 line, or OM5 line as it's sort of merged into in recent years. These are maybe a little bit bigger than the PL9, but they do have an EVF, they do have the dials, and above and beyond the Pen F, the EM5 and OM5 versions of that camera are also weather sealed. So definitely that's worth consideration. In terms of autofocus on both the Pen F and the PL9, it's contrast based. It's not anything to write home about. Both cameras were thwarted numerous times when it came to various bits of wildlife that I encountered. So don't be buying either of these if you regularly shoot wildlife. You can obviously get the odd one that works, but you might get 4 that aren't in focus for every one that is with your fast moving subjects. Both of these cameras are great for day-to-day travel, everyday carry sort of stuff, and less so anything fast paced. And my goodness, right? This is a flaw, but also an interesting insight. The battery life on both of these cameras is insanely good because both of them don't have USB-C and you can't even charge using a micro USB into a power bank. The only way that you can charge these cameras is taking the battery out and sticking it in the dedicated charger. Because I was in Cape Town and the plugs were a bit weird, I didn't have a travel adapter with me. So for an entire week with the Pen F, I did it on 1 charge, and the entire week with the PL9, the second week, I did it on 1 blooming charge. The PL9 has come back with charge. The Pen F, on the final day, I decided to leave doing a time lapse until it died. I thought, why not? So yeah, I did the whole 2-week holiday with just 1 single charge, and I took a lot of photos, hundreds of photos on both of these cameras, and the battery life did really well on both. Here's something that no one mentions about this style of cameras. When we're looking at Micro Four Thirds cameras that don't do something specialist, like for example, the OM1 Mark II has a stacked sensor, so you get incredible burst modes and it has really good subject detection, so you can use that for sports and wildlife. Outside of those niche Features. Most Micro Four Thirds images, whether it's 10 years old, 5 years old, or 5 days old, look about the same. Image quality is not something that like drastically changes throughout. So whether you bought the Pen F or the PL9 for a third of the price, if you took a photo side by side with the same lens, you would struggle to see the difference. Yes, you do get 20 megapixels versus 16 on the Pen F, so you could crop in a little bit more. Maybe because the different styles of sensors, the colours might be ever so slightly different. But when you're shooting in RAW and adding your own presets and style onto these images, they edit the same, they look the same. The low light performance is very similar across the board. There's not much, like, I would have to look into the metadata on Lightroom to know which photo came from which camera. So don't be buying the Pen F for that. Don't be buying any Micro Four Thirds camera for that. It's always the things that you're paying for are the extra bells and whistles. So it's the style of the Pen F and the experience of the Pen F versus the image quality. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about, because it is the experience and the style that makes the Pen F so expensive. If you are on a budget, it should give you a bit of a sigh of relief, because you could buy something cheaper and older and still get excellent results. But having said all that, it does come down to the bits beyond the image quality, the user experience. And I can say, hand on heart, I thoroughly enjoyed using both cameras on this trip. I did enjoy using the Pen F more, predictably, because of the EVF, because of the dials, and just because of the overall experience using that camera. The PL9 was in no way bad. It was in no way frustrating. It got the job done, and I bloomin' love the photos. But the Pen F did put a silly, cheesy grin on my face when I was using it. And whether that's worth 3 times more the price to you is a very personal choice. If it's just purely having an everyday carry camera that's small, does the job, looks decent, both will be great. I think if you wanted something more portable and cheap with an EVF, you could look at the Lumix GX85 on the Lumix side, or the EM5/EM10 line of cameras on the Olympus side. There's plenty of options available, and that's why I absolutely love Micro Four Thirds, because yes, the image quality might be similar across the board, which I personally like, because it means that whenever I edit something, I know exactly how it's going to turn out. But then you do have all the different bells and whistles. Like, you have an OM5 Mark II that's completely weather sealed and you can lob it in a lake. You have a G9 Mark II on the Lumix side, which will shoot 4K 120 frames a second slow motion. There's loads of bells and whistles on top of the bog standard image quality, which you can expect, which is always very high. So, which would you prefer? Would you rather have a bargain PL9, or would you have a fancy pants Pen F? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see my in-depth Pen F video, watch it next. I filmed it all in Cape Town and I really, really like the images that I got.